The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to the first in a new series of webinars entitled Turning Data into Measurable Business Insights, Self-Service Reporting. I'm Emma Riley of Eclipse, and joining me this morning is Donald of Feelight Software International. So to begin with, the agenda for the webinar, some introductions. First, these will take about a few minutes, and then we will lead on to the solution demonstration, which will take around 30 minutes. And then there will be a 10-minute Q&A slot at the end for any questions or queries you may have. So some background information. Eclipse was established in 1987. We've been helping organisations streamline accounting and finance processes. We've worked with more than 2,000 organisations in over 70 countries. In terms of our solutions and services, we provide accounting and financial management, budgeting and forecasting software, business intelligence, dashboards and reporting, which is where we'll be focusing today, financial close management and process automation, and finally, spend control and e-procurement solutions. Feelight Software International. The company was established in 2007. They are the author of the SharperLight software. The SharperLight software is fast to implement. It's a low maintenance, highly flexible reporting and business intelligence platform. And users are able to access data across multiple enterprise systems in real time. Users can create personalized dashboards and report packs, and there is a powerful engine and integration framework. So now I'll pass you over to Donald, who will provide an overview of the self-service reporting tool.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm just sharing my screen. So I'll just start off with the concept of SharperLight. It's a tool that can sit over and it allows you to actually pull information from those different sorts of systems, and it has a number of different presentation layers. So we have an add-in into Excel, so you can report or build reports directly in Excel. We also have a web front end as well, so you can actually build web reports, and you can also build dashboards and things like that through a web browser. In this series of webinars, we're breaking it up just to give you small snippets of the actual functionality. And we're starting off with the core of the product, which is what we call the query builder. So the query builder is really the tool you use to construct the queries. And though it's not a big reporting tool in its own right, it's quite fundamental, and it's very much around the concept of a self-service reporting tool. It's very ad hoc and flexible, and it is used by a lot of users. And it's used very much on an ad hoc sort of basis as something that somebody asks a question and they say, oh, okay, we'll just build this query here and now. We'll look at it and we may throw it away because you can so quickly actually build a query. So I've actually got the query builder actually open here. And I guess the key things that you notice here is the screen's broken up into 3 panes. There's a filter pane, there's a selection list, and there's an output pane. And I can change the selection list and the output panes by actually going in and selecting other tables to report from. So if I select the account transactions table out of GP, the screen refreshes. I get some new filters actually appearing in the filter pane. They're mandatory filters. And we have a selection list down on the left-hand side of fields. There's nothing in the output pane because I've just selected that sort of table. So the idea of SharperLight is it allows you to access these conceivably quite complex sort of systems, and it's made possible by a structure that's built into what we call a data model. So there's other reporting tools out there which use the data model sort of concept. And in a lot of respects, you know, some people describe OLAP cubes as data models because they describe a data structure. Our data model's a little bit different to what everybody else does. It's designed to sit over a live system. And you can actually access these data models and pull queries off, and you're literally running live queries against a live system. You could certainly run it over a data warehouse or a data store of such, but it's very much optimized over live systems. And you can see here I've got multiple data models, but I'm just going to focus on the GP one for the moment. I'll go back to my, my table. Just change my company. So if you know anything about GP has got multiple companies in it. And this allows you to actually report out of any of those companies. Like a lot of financial systems, they have like a business unit concept or a company concept. And Sharperlight is aware of those in the actual data model layer. You can actually just define it and say, okay, well, this is the company structure, and the company overshadows all the data structures. So you select the company and then you select the table you want to report out of. So for my purposes here, I'm just going to do a very simple little query. So let's just imagine somebody turned up and asked you a question and said, I'd like to know all the sales revenue that we've actually recorded in our accounting system in the last number of years. So all of it. You go, oh, okay, well, how am I going to do that? First off, I'm going to select the main ledger table out of the accounting system. So in GP, it's the accounts transactions table. I could go through and individually select the individual accounts, the sales accounts. But in this case here, I'm actually going to say all of those accounts. And what I'm going to want to do is actually filter it down to a very specific account range. So I'm only going to pick up accounts from 4,000 to 4,200. So I know these accounts in the standard demo company 2, which is supplied with GP, these are all the sales accounts. And I'm just going to output the account number and the account description and an amount. And you may have noticed here that there's a tab at the top that says preview, and there's actually a button down below. So I can actually preview that query. And what I've just done is, with a couple of clicks and a couple of filtering, I've actually generated a query, or created a query, and I've actually generated and extracted it into this preview pane. And that is basically a query over the live data. Now, if somebody was to post a journal right now, and it was to hit one of those sales accounts, if I was to then hit the refresh button, I would see that journal appearing there as one of the balances. Because literally it's going back to the underlying table in the database and returning all the transactions and summarizing the balance of an account. So I'm just returning the balance of an account. So as a tool for very quick ad hoc sort of requirements, you don't really need to know a hell of a lot about it. Simply, you've got a capability to do filtering, and the filtering allows you to click on little lookups. Well, it'll give you a list of actually available fields and things like that. In this case here, these are the accounts I'm interested in. These other descriptions have not been filled in this database. I can also filter the information by account numbers as well, or account type. So these are all standard sort of filter criteria. But the interesting thing around Sharperlight is that you could filter on any other field that exists in GP. So you could filter off something out of my account master, which is the equivalent to your chart of accounts in a GP database. So I could pull out, I'm only interested in posting accounts. And I could easily just drag that in as a filter. If I don't want to do that, I can just drag it out and remove it. So it is very much a case of just finding a field that you're interested in, which allows you to filter something, or it's a case of saying, okay, I have a field, and what I would like to do is output that field. So I could actually say, well, I'd like to output the reference number, which I don't. Or equally the company. So I preview that, and I get the company for all those transactions. Now, somebody who ask the original question, they go, oh, no, I don't want just for one company. I want all our companies. You go, oh, right, okay, I understand. So what I want to do is a consolidation across companies. So I can actually highlight all the companies and hit OK. And what it's going to do, it's actually going to change that filter. If I then do preview, okay, now what you see is I've got different companies appearing in this summary. So it's actually returning the balances for the different companies. If I was to take out that company ID and do my preview again, I would just be getting the balances of the accounts for all companies. Now, how do I know it's for all companies? Well, the query says that, but I can actually go through and analyze it and say, well, for that balance there, I'd like to see the details that make that up. So I can drill into it. And let's say, for example, I'm going to drill in by company. I'll drill in here. And what it does, it brings back the balance of the account sliced based on company. Now you'll notice there that all the balances are the same because my company 1 and company 6 are actually a copy of company 2. So that there is reason for that, even though it does look quite funny. Okay. And I can equally drill down on it further. So I could go down to the details if I wanted to, and I could drill down and I could actually see, let's say, for example, the reference, the description, and maybe the year and period. So I'll drill down again. So this is a secondary drill down. So I've done one level of drill down, and now I'm doing another level of drill down. You can see here how I've got a different slice of the information showing the transactional details. So from a very simple, whoops, and I've tried to drill down on again, which I didn't want to. I just wanted to make that a little bit wider. What we'll do is group this. Okay. So from a simple query, you can then go through and interrogate it further, which kind of gets back to that whole thing about self-service reporting, enabling end users who may not know the ins and outs of a complex underlying system, but they can do drag and drop, they can do simple filtering, they can pull out the information, and they can slice it in a couple of different ways without being technically very savvy. You know, you don't need a hell of a lot of training to actually pick up a tool like this. Now, with this sort of tool, you can actually save these queries. So you could save this as a file. So I could save this as a file and I could reuse it. I could take this query and I could put it into an Excel add-in. So our Excel add-in, I can take this query and put the query directly into Excel. And I can also take this query and I could push it into Publisher, and Publisher is our mechanism for putting it into the web. So it actually publishes it through to our web service and it becomes a web-based report. Now, so for this specific webinar, I'm not going to go through that. I'm just going to save a copy of this query and save it as a file, just to show that, yes, you can save it. And I will actually come back and reuse these queries when I do the other webinars. So I've got this query, and let's say, for example, somebody else walks up and says, oh, I'm just interested in seeing the current purchase orders. What new purchase orders have been created? And go, oh, okay, well, I can do a query for that. Now, you don't actually have to close the query builder and run another query or change it. You can actually open up as many query builders as you like. So I can go in here, and let's say, for example, we want to do purchase orders. So I'll go into transactions. You can see there's a very big, rich tree because GP is very rich with different data structures and core tables. For my purposes, I'm only interested in a very small subset of that data. In this case here, I'm only interested in purchase orders of a specific status. So I'll just drag the purchase order status up there. I will take all purchase orders. So I'm basically, instead of individually selecting it, I'll just say all. But I'm only interested in new purchase orders. And what I would like is the purchase order number, the vendor ID, the vendor name, and my purchase order total, which is that there. Now, following exactly the same paradigm that we showed before, I've quickly mocked up a simple little query. I hit the preview button, and hey presto, again, I've done a live query against the underlying database, and it's returned all the purchase orders that are currently in the system. And again, if somebody was to post a purchase order and I was to hit refresh, that new purchase order would then immediately appear. You go, oh, okay, I've got new transactions. And again, I could drill down on it. So the concept of the drill down, this on the fly sort of slice and dice, is intrinsic to how the product works. And it's a standard extension of the query builder. You can do the same sort of drill down within our Excel add-in. So it's a similar concept, or it's an identical concept in Excel. Okay, so we've got that query, we've got that query. Now, let's say, for example, go back to the person who was asking us about the sales, and they're saying, oh, yeah, that's really good. That's the information that I actually need, but I need to actually refine it a little bit more. You know, let's say, for example, they're only interested in the sales for a certain accounting period. They say, oh, 2014, that's what I'm interested in. With this, I can actually override. So I could just type it in. There is actually a wizard, but to be honest, a lot of these things can be just as easily typed in. If I rerun that query, that's now focused on the 2014 financial year. And the person that's asking about this is saying, oh, that's great. So what was the budget for that? You go, oh, right, okay. So the budget's stored in a different table. Right, okay. Now, we could actually bring the budget directly in here and put it right next to that query. But what we've done is we've actually built a table in the data model which allows you to do actuals and budgets comparison. So I'll actually use that because that does a nice alignment of all the periods. So I'll just go in here and I'll go to my budget and balances, oops, that one, and I will go to account actuals and budgets. Okay, so I've got a third query screen open, and just to avoid the clutter, I'll just move these down, but I've still got them open. Okay, so with this one, this is a little bit different. With this one, it's basically unified the actuals and budgets together, and it's the sort of thing that we do in data models to actually bring together diverse data sets that it may be closely aligned or the data set may be loosely aligned. And if you know much about budgeting in GP and how the budget's stored, it's sometimes a little bit kind of loose. So there's additional logic in here how it actually aligns things. I use the same period just to keep parity with what we were talking about. And again, I won't worry about account numbers. So I'm just going to select all accounts. So I'm just going to select all. So because it's all, it won't actually use that as a filter. And I'm going to use the account segment. Okay, so the account segment. So if you've never dealt with GP before, it's got a concept of a segmented account number. So I can use any of the different segments. If your system has 5 segments or 3 segments or 2 segments, Sharplight will automatically adapt to that and only show the segments which are relevant. Okay? And here again, I'll actually type in the account numbers. It's just as easy to do that as use the lookup. So in this case here, what I'm interested in I'll go for the account. Yeah, that's all right. I'll go for account number and account description. And I will output the period balance. Yes. Okay. I'll just run that query. Okay, so it's bringing back a balance. It's going, oh, well, that doesn't exactly look like the balance I had before. Which is probably that one. Oh, not the purchase order. That one. That's the one I want. Okay. Okay. Look at that, and look at that, and go, oh, it's different. And the reason why it's different is because it's actually combining all the sources together. So I've got both budget and my actual current transactions combined together. Now, I don't want that. I actually want two separate columns, one which is actuals and one which is budgets. I go, oh, okay. So what I can actually do is if I add, oops, dragged them on top of the wrong one. It's the book one. There we go. Okay, so this one here is going to be my actuals. And this is going to be, now what I'm doing is I'm actually naming these filters for a very good reason, which is not immediately apparent, but I will explain. I'm just going to change the description just to make it easier to visualize. And budget. Okay. And here I will set it so it's going to be actual. And the budget, now in GP you can have multiple budgets. So I'm only interested in one of the budgets. So I'm going to say I'm just interested in budget 3. So I've got 2 filters, but I've only got one output column for the balance. Okay. What I'll do is add the balance in again. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bind these balances to the filters. So I'm uniquely going to say, oh, when I return the balance, I only want to return the balance for the actuals, or I only want to return the balance for the budget. So I will change the description for these and I will say actual, balance, and I'll change the description for that and I'll say budget, balance. And if I go in here, I can actually link, basically join the output column to a filter. And this one here, I'm going to join the budget filter to this output column. Now, if I do a preview, okay, I've got them separate columns. So I've got all my actuals appearing here and all my budgets appearing here. And if I get rid of the source, and there we go. I've got a column of actuals and a column of budgets. So it's equivalent to this, but I've actually got the budgets there. Now I look at that and go, yeah, okay. Now they're revenue accounts, they're sales accounts, but they're negative. Now, if you show that to anybody who's not an accountant, they'll go, oh, it's a negative. Is that bad? So I can quickly go in there and say, no, it's good. Revenue negative is good. Don't worry. And I can actually reverse the sign. So to avoid confusion. Okay, so reverse the sign. Now, the interesting thing there is now that I've actually added those additional columns in, and I've basically filtered it, that column, based on the filters I've defined, but I still want a variance. I want to know the difference between one and the other. So it's like, right, okay, so how do I actually get a variance? Well, what you can do is you can add your own calculations, your own expressions, which is what I'll do right now. So here, what I'll do is say actual minus budget, and I'll change the description of that to be variance. Let's see if I can spell variance. Review. And there you go. So I have a variance of my actuals to budget, and the same calculation is carried forward at the very bottom. So the concept of very quickly, rapidly prototyping queries, previewing it. Now, these queries can then be reused, as I said before. So you could take this query and use it in Excel with the Sharper Excel add-in, or you could use it in the web. So you could take that query, push it into Publisher, and by it being in Publisher, it'll be available as a web-based report. Or if it's just a quick and dirty report that somebody's asked you a question, which is what the scenario was, if you don't need to reuse that report, you could just close the dialogue, because let's be honest, it only took less than a couple of minutes to create. So suddenly you've got a reporting tool which gives you that kind of throwaway sort of mentality, because a lot of reporting tools, you invest a lot of time in it to build a report. Whereas with Sharper, this whole thing of self-service and empowerment is you can build these simple reports, and if you don't want to keep them, you can just close it, because you've got the luxury of being able to create these queries again very, very easily. And that, I think, is kind of the key kind of takeaway, is that you can build it and you can screw it up and throw it away, as I like to say, because you know that you can recreate them so simply. And maybe next time it'll be a little bit different. You know, you'll change the way it works or something like that. But fundamentally, it gives you a lot of power, that sort of flexibility that you have. Anyway, okay, so if I was to then save this one, so I'll just save a copy of that, and we go back to this, and I jumped from this and I said, oh, I could actually add the budget into this query. I didn't have to go off and use this other table. And that's true. What I could have done is I could have added what we call a subquery. And that's what I'm actually just very, very quickly going to do. So the whole idea of a subquery is it allows you to actually go off and pull information out of another table in the data model, or conceivably out of another data model. And when I say data model, effectively that could be another system. So it allows you to actually pull information out of diverse systems and bring it all into the same query. Okay, so I've named those, and I will just change the name for this. This will all make sense. Okay, so I've got my naming right. I'll add a subquery. And I want to go to my end. So I'm going to use the same budgets table. This time I'm just interested in budgets. And I will only output book budget 3. Okay. I'm only interested in the balance. Okay. Now, for the period, you know, if you remember, I changed the name of the period in the parent query. I did that so it would stand out. So that is the name of the query from the parent query, the name of the period filter in the parent query. And the account number is the account number in the output. If I just run this preview. Sorry about the sound effects, but that's a thing that I do. Here we go. So you can actually see there the budgets. So they're all coming in alignment. So getting to the same solution, but just attacking it a slightly different way. Creating a subquery, and I can add an expression there as well. But creating a subquery is quite a useful bit of functionality because it allows you to go off and pull information out of other tables and draw it into one core query. And then you can link it based on the filters and the outputs in the parent query to the child query. Or conversely, if you have a table which has actually been built to bring together diverse data sets which are related but sometimes not easily related. In this case here, there is a custom table that's been built natively into our GP data model, which makes actual budget reporting very easy. So you use the native table. So what we try to do in the data model is we try to overcome standard sort of complexities, and actual to budget reporting we've seen is fairly complicated sometimes. And so this is a native table which allows you to do that very easily. Okay? And again, the ability to take that and reuse that content again and conceivably pass it on to other people. So with these queries here, you could save it to a file and you could email it to somebody else, and if they have access to Sharplight, they could run those queries as well. Okay, as I catch my breath, I just think if I've covered everything I wanted to, and I'm pretty sure I have. So yeah, it's all nice. Okay. And probably the last thing that I'd just mention is, though I didn't go into it, but what we will talk in other webinars is the different types of query mode. So far, this example was primarily based around building a summary report, so I aggregated the information. But when I actually do some examples in Excel in the next webinar, I'll actually do some examples of doing a detailed report, and I'll also use an aggregation formula. So that's a self-contained formula pulling a balance out into Excel, and that query mode is uniquely fitted to that. So there's just some little more bits of functionality which I'll talk about, but I'll leave that to the Excel add-in when I talk about that. Okay, Emma, I think we're time to do our questions.
Thank you, Donald. Please can anyone let me know if you have any questions, either by raising your hand or you can type a question in on your keypad. Thank you. Hi, Donald. A question has come in from Anna. Anna would like to know, how long does it take for teams to be trained?
Okay, so the query builder, which is kind of the building block, it normally takes 3 or 4 hours to kind of get your mind around how to use the query builder and get comfortable with navigating, picking the tables and getting a bit of a feel for it. If you know the underlying system, like if you're a GP user and you're using the GP data model, you've got a better understanding of the data structures. That makes it easier to actually learn it, because the data models are built so they relate to the underlying system. So a couple of hours for the query builder. Some of the other componentry, the Excel add-in might take a few more hours because there's specific ways you do things in Excel. And the web reporting, that's a couple of hours. So generally you can do a whole day training course. You can do the core product of the query builder, the Excel add-in, and the web reports in a whole day.
Okay, thank you. She would also like to know, what technical skills do you need to write Sharplight reports?
You don't need any technical skills at all. So I guess one of the key things is that we use Sharplight in very diverse sort of industries. So people on mine sites use it, people in warehouses use it, who've got really no computer skills whatsoever. The query builder is a very simple drag and drop sort of concept. You don't have to know the underlying system, because basically all those tables are already pre-built. It's really just a case of going in and actually looking at the fields in the selection list and say, well, I want that, and I want that, and I want to be filtered based on that. So it's very, very simple to pick it up. The other element which we haven't really touched on is the web report. So a report can be built and you can have it through a web browser, and you don't need any training to actually change a couple of filters and hit submit and run that report. So you can have people who've got a rudimentary knowledge, and then you can have a larger audience of people who have no knowledge whatsoever. It's just, I go to a page, there's filters, I put in the filters through a web browser, I click submit, and the report runs. It couldn't be easier.
Great, thank you. And Simon would like to know, does Sharplight work over SAP?
SAP Business One, yes. It also works over SAP HANA.
Okay, thank you. No further questions at this point, Donald.
Okay. Thank you.
Just leave it a second just to see if any more come in.
Okay.
Okay, so if there are no further questions, I would just like to take this opportunity to thank you everyone for taking the time out this morning, for joining the webinar. We will be running the next webinar in the series 2 weeks today, and invites will be sent shortly, or you can register for these via our website. So thank you very much, and I will leave our contact details up on the screen for if you do have any questions, but thanks again for your time.